Okay, so your assignment, your final assignment for the course is the following. It is a to be or not to be translation. It's going to translate the famous to be or not to be soliloquy in Act 3, Scene 1 for a modern day audience who present the speech in class. So this section and what you're doing is you're going to be taking the quintessential speech in Hamlet, which is his to be or not to be speech. You're going to translate it into for a modern day audience, which means you're going to translate it so that people living in our time will clearly understand what you're saying and will also clearly understand the message and ideas that are shared to the audience. Okay, so let's go over what I'm going to evaluate. And this is I'm going to evaluate the following. For knowledge of content, I know how to translate and adapt the soliloquy to be or not to be into modern day slang or vernacular. Hip hop, British slang, which is Cockney, a person from a decade in the 20th century, et cetera, et cetera. Right, so remember, I bolded two words, translate and adapt, which means that as you're doing this, I'm not looking for a word-to-word translation of the speech. I'm looking for you to be able to, in your different vernacular, recreate the speech and understand that translation is sometimes art of putting together things that are similar and using less words, or sometimes adapting the speech and the top subject or topic of the speech in order to convey the same message of the speech. Okay, so you have to be aware of that. I'm looking for more than just a strict translation, like a word for word one. I'm looking for your ability to translate and adapt the information into a message. Thinking, I know the obvious and hidden messages in the soliloquy to be or not to be. Conversation. Okay, so that's the part where I'm going to be editing and checking in with you, seeing what's going on. And what I mean by hidden obvious messages, we talk about a lot of situations where people, that when you're dealing with messaging, especially in the media, there is a direct message that the author wants to give you, and then there's a message that's hidden that sometimes it's a reflection of the values of the person reading the book or creating the material, or it's a reflection of the society. I mean, it's just a critique of it. It's an indirect message that's sent to the audience, right? So you're going to have to be able to identify what are the hidden obvious messages in soliloquy. I know my speech must use consistent diction, choice of words, and vocabulary. It simply means that if you're going to write in a slang or write in a modern text, you have to maintain words that would fit into that modern text or vocabulary or slang. And you can't really change it up. So if you said, I'm going to do it using an English accent, and halfway through saying, no, I want to change it to do it where I am a person who grew up in the 1980s. You can't really make that switch. You got to keep it consistent. I know that my speech must cover at least 5 of the major points from the original text. And again, we'll go over that in the success criteria. But what I mean is that depending upon how you're going to translate and adapt your speech, you got to keep the same messaging, at least 5 major points or 5 major points within the message that the original speech gives. You've got to maintain the same. Then I know how to express and summarize the ideas found in the soliloquy to be or not to be. So again, I'm really looking for your ability to express those ideas and come across with the message of what the author's saying and what Hamlet's saying in that speech when he's speaking to himself, but really talking to the audience. Oops, sorry, I'm acting a little weird here. I know how to use code and conventions of a given speech, which means you're going to be saying it, you're going to either do it with me live or record it, and that means a couple of things. Clear voice, right? Proper enunciation, proper tone, using consistent slang, idiom, or vernacular. It just means that when you're doing the speech, you got to make sure you keep, they're using the right tone to express the right emotions at the time of your speech. You want to make sure your voice is clear, that you're doing it in a way that the author or the audience, namely me, can understand what you're saying. And you got to also remember to keep your same tone or vernacular or idiom. You can't just change it in the middle of this, your speech because you want to revise it or translation because you don't like it. Last part is always the writing process, outlining rough drafts, final drafts. So everyone knows the deal. I'm looking for those things to be done. I'm looking for you sending me your work for me to give you feedback. If you don't, that mark gets affected. Okay, let's look at the success criteria for this assignment. All right, so the goal is to read soliloquy to be or not to be and translate and adapt it to a person in our world who would understand the message and ideas of the speech. Must go beyond strict translation. So it means again, if it's a strict translation, you could have simply go to Sparks Notes, type in the to be or not to be speech, or find it in Act 1, Scene 3, Act 3, Scene 1, and you can have a strict word for translation. I'm not looking for it. I'm looking for you to translate the term, but also interpret it. And it's okay to, in the process of creating your own interpretation, translation, adaptation of the speech, that you look at a modern day, you look at a strict translation so you know what's going on, and then you take the translation and you adapt it to a different vernacular or audience or way of expressing oneself that is more consistent and more easily understood with people who are living who lived in the 20th/21st century. Okay, so step 1 is to read soliloquy in Act 3, Scene 1. You want to identify the message of the speech. So when people read the speech, it's very confusing because it's the famous one where he talks about living or dying, should he commit suicide or not. And when people hear that, people think that it's him really giving into his depression and him really expressing that he just wants to end his life. And part of it is, but this speech is a microcosm or an example of Hamlet's personality. He, in the speech, will spend 25% of the time talking about, hey, maybe killing myself is the right thing to do because I'll be able to achieve my goal, I'll be happy, and I don't have to put up with all this stuff. But then spends the other 75% talking himself out of doing that. And one of the chief reasons is he has no knowledge of what life is like after death, and therefore is unwilling to risk it in case it'll be worse. So again, it's a reflection of Hamlet because Hamlet is a person who does not act unless he's 100% sure. Since he's not 100% sure what's going to happen to him after death, he won't act. All right, so again, we can break it down in just looking at it, 25% of the speech is, yeah, I should try this new thing. I should commit suicide and go to the unknown region, unknown world. But the other 75% is like, yeah, but there are numerous reasons why you shouldn't do it. And I guess I'm a coward. So therefore I'm going to stay where I am and just endure the pain, right? Because Hamlet would rather deal with a known pain than an unknown situation. So keep that in mind, that he prefers a known pain versus an unknown situation. So he will always get punched in the face 1,000 times every day, even though he hates it. Because if someone says, well, you don't have to get punched in the face 1,000 times, you just have to climb that ladder. If Hamlet has no idea what will happen after he climbs the ladder, during when he climbs the ladder, he won't do it. He'll say, no, I'll stick with the punches. Okay, so here's just, again, when I've worked with other classes, they've kind of broken it down to this is what the speech is about. Should I die? Should I live with these tragedies, or rest and die in peace? Right? So he's saying, should I die and live? Should I die? Or should I live with all these tragedies, all these things around me that make me upset? Or should I die and rest in peace? Death or peace sounds good, right? So he's convincing that, but then he switches. So he's talking about, killing oneself might be the solution to everything, but then he spends the rest of the speech talking himself out of it. He says the next thing he'll talk about is, you don't know what will happen after death. Without knowing, you won't be able to go you will not be willing to go to the other side. He's talking about himself, but he also talks about the audience that you're not willing to risk what life would be like after death if you don't know what it actually is. Right? Then he says you'll live with the following, right? Abuse from superiors, unrequited, unreturned love, insults from other people, a corrupt legal system. And it ends with the idea that people are afraid to die. So these are just the main points of what I'm talking about. It's far more, it's more detail, more nuance. But he says that that people are that's what they're going to do. They're going to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and anything that offers them pain, they're not going to do. So Hammond's speech says that all people are cowards and all people are unwilling to make the decision. And that's how it is, right? They'll live with a situation they hate rather than try something new. Okay, so now what I want to do is show you some examples of what this looks like, what I'm looking for. I'm going to click on these different ones. We're going to look at level 4 plus, level 4, level 3 plus, and then I'm going to ask you why you think I would have given that specific performance that mark, right? This is just the ways to help you sort of get an understanding of what I'm looking for. Can you all see
So
this?
let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big...
So I was like thinking, is it better to like live or die? If I just keep taking it, would I be like more of a hero? Because you know, I'm like totally suffering and stuff. Or should I like actually fight and like totally die? Dying, sleeping. OMG, I love sleeping. They're like basically the same thing, right?
I don't think I can hear the noise if they say.
Bad feelings and fix my like totally broken
Can you hear anything? You can't hear anything.
I cannot hear anything.
Can you hear?
heart.
Can you hear it
All
now?
these bad things are just like part of life
No,
or dying.
it's really
Okay.
quiet.
Okay, it is a very quiet one. So just try to listen. I'm going to turn up as loud as I can. Just try to listen intently. And maybe there's captions. So I'll try it again with captions and see if you can follow along, okay?
Okay.
Here we go.
So I was like thinking, is it better to like live or die? If I just keep taking it, would I be like more of a hero? Because you know, I'm like totally suffering and stuff. Or should I like actually fight and like totally die? Dying, sleeping. OMG, I love sleeping. They're like basically the same thing, right? And if I like die, then I could totally stop all the bad feelings and fix my like totally broken heart. I mean, all these bad things are just like part of life. Sleeping or dying. That sounds like so nice. And like dreaming, but that's so totally the problem. Maybe like when I'm dead, I'll still like totally dream of stuff. Like when I was like alive. So wait, maybe I should like think about this dying thing for a sec? Because this whole pain and heartbreak stuff, it could like totally last forever if I die. It would like kind of suck if I had to keep like suffering like I do in life. Because then that means people would still like be totally awful to me, and stupid boys would keep like breaking my heart and being jerks, and the whole world would just like be a mess. And I like mentioned that people could still be totally horrible. I'm like not sure if killing myself would actually make that stuff like disappear. I mean, it's like why would I keep like putting up with all this stuff and having like totally the worst life ever unless something inside me was like scared about death. I mean, dying totally isn't like going to the mall or something. You don't know if for sure if there's gonna be like a juicy outlet or like a Victoria's Secret, because no one's ever like been there and then come back to tell us what death is like. So I guess like because death is so mysterious and stuff, all the totally like awful stuff in life actually seems literally way better than the scary like mysterious death. So does this being scared of death thing like make me not brave and stuff? Because I totally just spent way too much time like literally thinking about what might happen if I like kill myself. I totally could have like gone shopping or gotten a tan or like killed my murderous uncle or something in this time, but I totally didn't because I was so busy being scared of death. And now I'm like so depressed I don't even want to do anything. OMG!
Okay, today is June 1st. say your name and spell it?
Okay, so why do you think I would have given that a level 4 plus?
A the way they translate is like easy to understand.
Right. So yeah, translation is great, right? They really capture all the parts of this of it. They adapt it because they adapt it to include sort of modern day references like dying is not like going to the mall because you don't know, like they you know they compare it to something that people can relate to. Also, one of the things they did was they when she's talking about I spent too much time worried about this, goes one of I could have gone shopping or I could have killed my murderous uncle, right? They are making a joke about the fact that they're translating a text in which it's about a guy who's not willing to do stuff to kill his murderous uncle. And they're making a fun joke like, I could have done all these other things like, I don't know, murder my murderous uncle. I could have gone to the mall. So it's just a joke within a joke. One of the key things I think it's a level 4 plus is they took a soliloquy, which is one person speaking, right? And a soliloquy is a person speaking to the audience, right? Expressing their emotions. Soliloquies are almost like the people on stage see the audience and include the audience in a conversation, right? And they're telling the audience how they feel inside. Here, what they did was they became a duo. They divided it up and they made soliloquy into a conversation. Right, so that's level 4. It shows that, hey, I understand I have to translate this in a very specific way, but I'm going to add this other thing of making it a dialogue so that the messages are clear, but I'm showing this adaptation and mastery of this. Okay, so let's look at another one. This one is level 4. And again, what the person did was he just read the original speech, but then he put in the text at the bottom, his modern day language translation. So let's just watch that one. It should be much louder, I believe.
Take 22. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them, to die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep. To sleep, perchance to dream, aye, there's the rub. For in this sleep of death, what dreams may come! When we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might his quietus make with a bare bodkin? Who would farthels bear to sweat and grunt under a weary life, but that the fear of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to those that we know not of. Thus, conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er by the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pith and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. And then Ophelia comes in, and how do you close this thing?
Okay, so for that one, again, just so we can speed the process, we basically spoke in the original speech language, but then just expressed it in a modern day language. He swore a little bit more than I'd liked, but the idea was to get across that he understands, and then he would alter it in certain ways to make it more contemporary. That's an example of a translation. I'm gonna show you one more, which is level 3 plus, could be 4 minus, of someone who also did another translation of this speech.
Question. Would I rather be alive or 6 feet under? Am I a boss if I just deal with all the garbage in my life? Or should I fight and cut the crap out for good? To me, dying is like being asleep, being knocked out cold. That's how I would end my pain, and the bull life has been thrown my way. Yeah, that's what I'm about. Me dying is like me sleeping, and I might even dream. Wait, that's the catch. When we die, don't nobody know what kind of dreams we gonna have, especially we have to leave all of this mess behind. That for sure has got me thinking now. That's why don't nobody want to die. They rather sit here and suffer. I mean, who really wants to put up with all the embarrassments of life? Stuff like being abused by the man, conceited heads, lovers getting no play, the jacked up legal system, rude people in office, innocent people being taken advantage of by these hood rats. When we could just draw our guns, send one shot to the dome, and end it. Who's really gonna go through all this we call life? Only if they scared of something bad happening after they die. The grave. A place nobody has ever peeped or comes back from. We all think about it though, and don't get no answers, so we stick to the shit we know, instead of going to find out for ourselves. Being afraid to die makes us all punks. All of us. Thinking too much makes us weaker by the minute. Then we stop doing things we said we was going to do. But here comes Ophelia.
Okay, another good example. Just an interpretation of the text in modern day language, covers the ideas, makes sure they hit key points. So I'm giving you like 3 of them. There's tons of them online, but those are the 3 that I think are good examples of what I'm looking for in your speech. All right, step 3 is to create your own modern version. Now, when you're doing it, there are 2 ways of doing this. You don't do all 3. There are 3 different ways of achieving this. You can use, the first one is to just use a particular slang or vernacular when you are putting it in modern day language, which means a way of speaking terms and words that have different meaning within this slang or vernacular. So gangster, flaggers from the 1980s, Cockney, slang from a decade, 21st century, 1950s or 60s, Australian, or even in text messages. Those are all examples of language that's in a vernacular or slang that has its own rules. Terms and words mean different things. Not way out there, but it's just a different way of addressing certain things. And if you choose that, it means you're going to basically translate the speech, but through the eyes of that individual and how they express themselves. Or you can change the topic to something familiar, right? They continue to be an athlete, to be a vampire human, a choice between a known hardship and an unknown situation. So this number 2 is, if you do this, what you're doing is you're changing the topic, right? So in the original text, Hammond is talking about, should I kill myself or should I live? Okay. Now, I know when people, but what he's actually saying is, should I do something new, try something new, or should I stick with the known pain that I exist in, right? And remember I said that Hammett is always going to choose the known pain versus the unknown situation. So if you're going to do this, let's say, Patrick, you're going to do this, and let's say you're going to do it as, okay, I want to do it as to play basketball, not to play basketball. When you're doing it, in your speech, you've got to convey that you want to quit basketball and you're thinking about what it would like to quit basketball. You spend 25% of your speech talking about the advantages of not having to play basketball. But in the rest of the speech, the other 75%, you are talking about why you won't give up basketball, how it might affect your physical fitness. People may not like you anymore, whatever the reasons are, right? So you say, basically, you agree to keep up the uncomfortable aspect of your life in order to avoid a new situation. So when doing that, the athlete who says, should I quit basketball or not quit basketball, he agrees to play basketball even though he hates it because he's too afraid what will happen to him if he doesn't play basketball, right? So if you're doing that specific way, you've got to be able to identify the known pain that the character is, or whatever in your book or whatever you're reading, is suffering from, versus an unknown situation where the only way you can experience that situation is if you live through it or go through it or do the thing that you want to do, right? And you have no idea how it's going to impact your life and your mentality. So that's the difference. Third one you can do is read the speech with subtitles on video. So again, there are examples of it, but it just can't be a strict translation. It has to be, okay, if I'm doing it this way, I've got to do it in a way that shows I'm using slang and terms that not necessarily people have to understand in order to convey that in order to convey that information. So it can't be something completely different and odd. But if you're doing this where you're reading the speech but you have subtitles, the subtitles should translate into how people express themselves in the 21st century. Okay, so the writing process, now I broke it down in 6 parts. This speech or this translation is going to be one long paragraph, but I'm just saying these are the 6 things you have to sort of address. In part 1, should I die? Part 2, dying would make my life easier. Then part 3, but wait, what happens after we die? Part 4, we don't know what will happen after we die. Part 5, since we don't know, we're willing to put up with so much. And part 6, so like everyone else, I will do nothing. That's the gist of what your speech has to say and do. Now, before I leave you, are there any questions? Hello, anyone there?
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have any questions, anyone?
No.
No.
Okay, so do you know what speech you're translating?
To be or not to be, that one.
Right, so it's in Hamlet, right? And they're different, right? So here are different, when I typed it in, Here are numerous versions of it. If you just want to hear it in its original text, I'm not going to play the entire thing, but here.
Little Caesar's pepperoni and cheese stuffed crazy crust is back with even more pepperoni. Dive into a feast of pepperoni, Parmesan pepperoni, sauce, more pepperoni. Look, there's some pepperoni in that crust. Order a pepperoni and cheese stuffed crazy crust with even more pepperoni for $11.99. Delivery.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
All right, so that's a speech you have to find. You can find it in Sparks Notes. So another thing I'm suggesting to when you do this is you should go look up just a strict word-for-word translation, so you're not spending a lot of energy and time trying to decode the original text, right? You should literally go from find the original text, to be or not to be, then look at, on Sparks Notes, the direct translation, because the direct translation is a translation that just puts it into terms that you understand in a general aspect. And then from that direct translation, you then adapt that and translate that into a modern day type of communication that people would understand. And understand the key message of Hammett is unwilling to do anything that he's not 100% sure is right, right? Because that's the speech. If you understand the speech, you understand Hammett, then everything he does, while infuriating, makes sense, because he's saying, I can't, you see how he would say, if I hate everything around me, maybe I should just kill myself, get over with. But then he literally just talks himself out of the situation, right? I won't do anything because I don't know, Alex's gonna be on the other side. He makes excuses, right? The same way when he could have killed Claudius when he's praying, he makes himself an excuse, right? I can kill him now, but he's praying, so I'll wait till he does something wrong. Or just kill him now, right? The idea that, while in Christian belief, if you ask for forgiveness and you're sincere, you'll be granted it. He also did kill a king, which is a cardinal sin in the church, right? You're not supposed to, the king is supposed to be God's representative on earth. You kill a king, that's a slight that I don't think God will let slide by, right? So the idea, this level of hypocrisy, the idea that Hamlet's like, well, God won't, he'll give him a pass even though he killed his representative on earth for their state. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're doing it. All right, any other questions before I stop and go to the other group?
No, not for now.
Okay, great.